Chapter 1. We Awakens call the demon-possessed, reanimated creatures UDs, or the undead. Some UDs even like it because the title contains the word dead, but UDs officially call themselves UVs, unveilers, because they view their job as unveiling the evil within mankind. It is the task of the Awakens to destroy UDs and bring out the image of God in mankind. Awakened Incident Manual, AIM, Volume 2, page 7. 100 years ago, April 2nd, 1918, Northern France. Lance Corporal Elliot Allen sat crouched in a muddy trench, huddled up against his Lee Enfield rifle, shivering in the cold, light rain. His stomach growled. His last meal, a single can of make-and-ochi, had been more than 16 hours earlier, and that watery stew of turnips and carrots didn't fill him up much. He removed his helmet for a moment to scratch his lice-infested head and struggled to keep his eyes open as he waited for the order to climb out of the trench and attack. He stared into his helmet at the faded, scratched photo of his wife, sitting on the beach, her bare feet buried in the sand. For a moment he was able to focus on her lovely face and leave this canyon of mud behind. Her smile a reminder of better days. Her best feature was her eyes that sparkled with a bright... The color of her eyes suddenly eluded him. His chin trembled. Why can't I remember the color of Anna's eyes? What's wrong with me? He stared at the black and white picture, searching for some sign of color. His second lieutenant signaled the attack. Elliot's body shuddered as if coming out of a trance. He donned his helmet. No longer afraid, he had long ago become numb to the thought of his own death in this land cursed by God. Elliot turned to the other 11 men in his section. "Lads, it's time to hop over the bags. Let's get those Huns." A low roar made its way down the trench as men stood, some for the last time. Elliot knew what lay ahead. A larger force, dug in and armed with MG-08 machine guns. He led the way up the ladder, keeping his head down. He waved his men up and over the sandbags that lined the trench. As the last man came over the bag, Elliot glanced at the battlefield ahead to map out his path, but a thin covering of fog blanketed the area. Barren and desolate, a sea of mud, barbed wire, and populated by the occasional body, he could make out the shadowy figures of men as they crept toward the Huns. All color had drained from this world, and like the picture in his helmet, everything was shades of gray. No one lived here. They only died here. Died by the thousands. If only I could remember the color of Anna's eyes. Crouched over, Elliot wove his way around burned-out stumps and red-tinted water-filled craters, trying to find his footing in the ankle-deep mud. He passed the rotting carcass of a horse, its large, black, vacant eye staring up at him. The place smelled of decaying flesh and cordite, yet it was strangely quiet. A white butterfly perched on a burned-out stump briefly caught his attention, its delicate beauty totally out of place in this desert of death. He glanced behind to see his men making their way toward the enemy's trenches. His focus returned to the path ahead. He took a deep breath, sucking in air heavy with the thick, burning residue of war. He coughed. His eyes watered. He rubbed them. At that moment, Lance Corporal Elliot Allen froze. Now he knew why it was quiet. A dirty yellow cloud drifted toward his lines like a fog bank rolling in from the sea. It was HS. Hun stuff. Mustard gas. He reached for his gas mask. Gone. In a sudden panic, he patted himself down. Nothing. A tremor raced through his body. It must have fallen off when he crawled out of the trench. He turned to run back to get it, but slipped and dropped face down in the mud. He struggled to get up, but before he could stand, he was engulfed by the toxic cloud. He tried not to breathe in. His face flamed as if he had been dipped in fire. He couldn't hold his breath any longer. His blazing lungs forced him to gulp in air. It tasted sweet, but his throat burned. His eyes watered, and he turned his head to vomit in the mud. His men screamed, sliced through to his very soul. He cried out to God. The gas was too thick to see anything, until a dark form walked, almost glided toward him like a black phantom against the yellow wall of gas. His arm shook and he raised his hand. God, thank you for rescuing me. When the form got closer, he saw it was a man without a gas mask, but seemingly unaffected by the poisonous cloud that surrounded them. Elliot tried to focus on the man through stinging eyes. He struggled to his knees and raised both hands. Help me. The phantom stood over Elliot and smirked. I'm not here to help you. The phantom leaned down and glared at Elliot. A chill rolled down Elliot's spine. The creature's eyes were dark, like shiny black pearls. It shook its head and spoke with a deeper, hollow-sounding voice. Your God will not help you either. If he had any sense, he would wipe all of you off the face of the earth like he almost did in the time of Noah. It looked up and scanned the battlefield. Maybe he doesn't have to. You seem to be doing a fine job on your own. Elliot could no longer see. He rubbed his eyes, a scream building in his throat, begging to be released. The phantom took a deep breath. Mustard gas. It has kind of a sweet taste to it, don't you think? As he heard it walk away, he dropped his head back into the mud. He knew who the phantom was. He'd heard stories from men who had taken days to die from the vile gas. Stories of a yellow devil who prowled around in the poisonous fog. Elliot threw up again as the phantom stopped. By the way, your wife's eye color is green. She'll be oh so saddened to know you forgot that. With a sardonic smile, it turned and left. Someone with a gas mask found him and pulled him back into the trench. He was evacuated to a field hospital behind the lines. A week later, he died, but not before he whispered the story of his strange encounter to a thin man with a slight Middle Eastern accent who seemed to believe him. Awakened Incident Manual, AIM Report Number 1120. The Dusting of Aharon, the Self-Proclaimed Exalted One, entered by Lazarus, A.D. 1918. Having confirmed from Lance Corporal Allen before he died that an undead, a UD, was stalking the battlefields around Somme in the gas clouds, I determined to hunt him down and dust him. I couldn't pass up any opportunity to take out a UD, even if it meant I would have to search the battlefield it seemed to inhabit. Having already died, I hate looking at so much death. I waited near the front lines until a report came through of another gas attack. My eyes burned to the point of anguish, but my awakened body fought off the deadly effects of the mustard gas. The real pain came from the realization that naturals could commit this atrocity on each other. As thick as the gas was, it didn't cover the stench of death, of lost dreams, of abandoned humanity that permeated this place. I must have wandered the field for over an hour when I first caught sight of it. The UD was standing over a fallen soldier, much like Corporal Allen had described. As I approached, the UD looked up and sneered at me. This was no ordinary UD. Lazarus. Boker Tov. I wondered when our paths would cross. It scanned the battlefield, dark delight dancing across its face. Don't you love what mankind has accomplished here? It knew my name. Who are you? That's a good question. I go by so many names. It stroked its chin, a smirk riding its lips. But you can call me Aharon. It stared me straight in the eye, something no UD had ever been able to do. Dressed in a black suit, complete with a black shirt and gray bow tie, it seemed out of place, yet at home in this wilderness of death. Its dark, venomous eyes sickened me. I had to turn away. I glanced at the dying soldier laying at Aharon's feet. He was breathing, so I sat down in the mud and rested the dying soldier's head on my lap. Watching a natural die ripped at my heart. Aharon looked down with a snort.
How touching. You do know that this man is killed.
I ignored him, having learned long ago that you do not argue with evil.
I suppose you've come to dust me.
It shrugged.
I'm tired of this decaying body anyway, so let me save you the trouble.
It swung its arms out wide in a broad gesture, as if preparing to hug the desolation.
Look around you. This field alone is full of fresh real estate for me to inhabit, and more will become available tomorrow. By seeking out a new home, I'll be sharing my blessing with the newly dead.
I looked up, silent, struggling to maintain some semblance of eye contact. Who is this creature? Could it be a new breed of undead?
When we cross paths again, I will be in a form you cannot touch.
It paused as its smile grew wider.
Our meeting today like this is, so significant.
It nodded.
I'm sure you think it's something that Carpenter arranged. You give him too much power.
It spat on the ground, then suddenly dissolved into dust without contact from me. I sucked in a deep breath, something that was quite painful in the gas-filled air. Somehow, Aharon had dusted itself. In almost 2,000 years of hunting UDs, I'd never encountered one like this. Certainly the most enigmatic Level 1 UD I've ever dealt with. Could it have been the UD? If so, why did it dust itself? I stepped forward to collect the reddish-brown dust when someone behind me said, "Don't!" I turned and saw two men I had first seen thousands of years ago in the plaza where Jesus was beaten. Since then, the gatherers have reappeared many times, often to help the awakened, especially new ones. Over the centuries, they have been assigned various names, in part because they never stopped long enough to introduce themselves. I believe the current names were Holmes and Watson. Both were thin but very muscular. Both were dark-skinned as if they had spent all their lives on the desert. Holmes was the taller of the two by a good 6 inches. Watson had light brown hair, while Holmes had brilliant red hair. "We will take that dust." It was Watson who spoke up. "Why?" They only smiled. They never were big talkers. I walked away, leaving the dust to them.